Good morning. I'm C.J. Butler, and I'm with the Darden College of Education. Seems like I've been here forever. But anyway, I started teaching in distance learning back in the mid-'90s when it was really just getting started. I don't know if any of you remember those days, but we didn't have PowerPoint. We used to have to copy our material onto blue paper. You remember that? And shuffle it around. And there was a great concern about class sizes and participation and the fact that, you know, the kids at distance or the kids, I call them kids. Well, they're kids to me. I'm old. But the students weren't really participating to the same degree that our students were participating in the classrooms. And so I got to thinking about it, and I said, you know, why is it that our students in the face-to-face classes will participate pretty actively, while the students in distance really tend to be more reserved and to themselves? Now, many of the faculty said it was because they actually weren't there, because we couldn't see them. And I didn't believe that. But what I really thought was that there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty among our students because they were conditioned to only give the correct answer. So if we asked them a question, they didn't know the absolute correct answer, they weren't willing to risk anything. So the motto for my class became, there is no failure, only feedback. And what I basically started saying to my students was, I need you to participate, otherwise you're going to get 3 hours of me doing this. And that did not appeal to them in general, although some people think that they wanted that, I don't know. But what I decided was we needed to really look at what works in terms of instruction, and we knew that there were certain things that worked. And the first thing that I implemented was a case study approach, where we took theory and competencies and started building them into practice so that students could actually try and understand what these things looked like in the classroom. I mean, because by and large, teachers, when they go into the classroom and they have a challenging situation, you know, they don't sit down and say, well, today I think I'll use some differential reinforcement of other behavior. I mean, they just don't think that way, even though that's what they're going to do. So what we wanted them to be able to do was to put it in their own words and answer the questions from a frame of reference that showed that they knew a lot of stuff. So we started with a case study approach and found that it was very successful. But there was still, I was still feeling a little uneasy because what I had was a clear separation between groups of students. I had those students that would go into the book and find the right answer. And then I had those students who were doing the case studies really the way I wanted them to be done, which was more of in line with like a KWL model, right? What do you already know? What do you want to learn? And what have you learned model? So I said, okay, I need to change this. And so what I started doing was changing when we did the case studies. And so what we began to do was put the case studies in at the end of the lectures. And we would actually do an anticipatory study for the next lecture. And what I found then was all of a sudden now I was getting students who were using language that wasn't consistent with what was in the textbook. Oh, every now and then, of course, you all know you have those students that read the entire text before they come to class. So they knew a lot. Yeah, we do have them. Trust me, we do. Now, the shame of the matter there was they don't always know what it looks like, and they don't always know what it means, but they knew what the words were. But what I found was that when I started implementing with a more anticipatory model, I started getting more involvement. And just to give you an idea, my classes, my classroom behavior management class, we've had as many as 327 students in that class across the Commonwealth and out in Washington and Arizona and different places. The classes aren't quite that big now, but in its heyday, we were running some huge sections. And to get people involved was really like pulling teeth. You're always gonna have those students, and I'm sure any of you who teach in distance, you know you have those students that you actually know after like the second week because they participate even when it's inappropriate. So anyway, I had what I was trying to do though is encourage students. This was before Adobe Connect and all the other technology that we had, to get them involved, to be able to interact. And one of the concerns was, you know, it's interesting that Terry would say, if you build it, they will come. Well, that was kind of the issue. We put these case studies and this interaction in, and guess what? They came. And all of a sudden what I found was my lecture time was getting consumed with people who wanted to talk and participate. So we had to really limit how that looked. And so I had a block at the end of each session that was designed specifically for that. We followed up with discussions directed through me, and then I would forward it out to the students, in a discussion format. And it's since that time, it has evolved. And it has evolved now into the point where we're now using LiveText. Some of you may be familiar with LiveText. We've built our rubrics for response. Students can self-check after the case studies are done. Our students, talking about evaluations, student evaluations are critical in teacher prep, because we've got to know how we can make our preparation and our coursework more significant, more relevant for our students, because they're going out into the classrooms and really having the greatest impact on our future. So one of the things that we have looked at is, what do our students tell us about what they need when they leave? And what we hear over and over again is, we need to know how to apply. And so with this model, I've noticed that my evaluations, particularly in the classroom management course, but we've now moved this into pretty much any class that I work with, and pretty much any class that I help develop with other faculty, simply because what we've seen from our students is they like the case studies. They enjoy them. They learn a lot from them. In fact, I've had several students say, I don't really remember much else, but I do remember the case studies. And I'll take that, because similar to what was said earlier, unfortunately, a lot of our students, they take their information, they learn it for just that space and time that they need it, and then they purge it because they've got a lot more material that they've got to learn. And we really don't want that in classroom management. For those of you who have been in the public schools, it's the #1 problem cited by all teachers. And it has been for the last 15 years. And prior to that, probably, but we've been monitoring it in Virginia for 15 years. So it was something that was really critical for us. So we've really targeted our management class to utilize this model. It's really interesting, because what we did was, when we first wrote our cases, we tried to make them things that were kind of benign and would be easy enough to answer. But what we've done over time, we've evolved to the point where they're much more complex now, and it really causes our students to think. And one of the things that I say to my students is, folks, there is no right or wrong answer here necessarily. You need to support your position with what you're going to do. And so it's really important that we recognize the critical nature of allowing students to inquire, to think on their own, and then take what we teach them and put it into practice as best we can in the model that we have available to us. Now, as we're evolving again, we have things like, we have simulation labs, and we have a new lab that we're using out at the Tri-Cities campus. And I don't know if any of you ever get out there, but if you ever do, there's a simulation lab out there called the Teach Me Lab, and it's a pretty cool lab. It's one of the best simulators I've ever been around. It's not always up and running because we don't keep it running all the time because it costs. But if you ever want to see that, it would be something to observe. The reason I bring that up is because what we've done is we've paralleled a lot of our case studies around the personality types that are in the Teach Me Lab, and so that helps the students then be able to really see and practice how to do what it is that we're talking about in the classroom. What we found is also we've extended this beyond our traditional classroom model, and we now have a residency program called the Teacher Immersion Residency Program through the Darden College of Education. And we've started using this same approach with them and have found it to be extremely successful, because they are now taking it not only into their lab, into the lab there, but they're also taking it into their classrooms and then coming back and giving us feedback based on what they've learned. So again, I think our approach has been, how do we build not only competency, which is what is really of critical nature in terms of instruction, but also confidence, and then more importantly, the understanding of how to move from instruction, research, to practice. And that's what the case study approach has allowed us to do. I'll be doing a roundtable also, and I'll be happy to talk to you about how it's evolved and some of the things that we're doing now. We really have allowed the students to self-monitor, and they do self-check. I do not grade their case studies. I grade them for completion only. The fact that they do them, that's how they earn their points. And there's a side effect of this. I am one of the old school instructors. I require my students to get a current stamp from their site, and they can only turn in the studies that have the original stamp, because believe it or not, our students are pretty creative. They will get a copy of a stamp and do things like that. And the reason I did this was because there's a direct correlate between attendance and achievement, right? Now, do we recognize that through distance, one of the things that we want to make available is the convenience of our programming? And I agree to that, and I agree with that. But I really feel like, and have had feedback from students who have said to me, even when I miss a class, I can watch the archive. I learn from it, but it's not the same as being there and hearing the discussion in its original format. And I think that's really interesting, because I know that while we're always moving forward in technology, I do not think that we will ever be able to really replace that interaction that is so critical among our professionals. And and a lot of my teachers that I'm working with, they are teachers. They're in the teaching profession. So what they bring is real life experience, and unfortunately, in many cases, they bring almost what I would consider to be the dark side of it, because they're first year teachers, and you and I both know. Do you remember your first year? Remember the students you had? They are the case studies, okay? They're the case studies because they get those kids and they're really having to work uphill. So we've seen this be extremely successful. The other faculty that I've shared this with have moved on and expanded it and extended it into other areas. And again, we see it as a very, very positive step in creating more student engagement, more student involvement, and actually better student outcomes. Thank you.